The transport shuttle's engines hummed quietly as it approached Zenith Station, humanity's premier military training facility orbiting the gas giant Kepler 442b. Through the viewport, Petty Officer First Class Sarah Chun watched the massive structure grow larger, its rotating rings and docking bays a testament to human engineering prowess. The station housed the best military minds from across the Sol system and beyond, training the next generation of space combat specialists. Sarah adjusted her regulation uniform, the crisp fabric hiding the countless scars that mapped her body like a warrior's journal. At 28, she looked younger than her years, with an athletic build that suggested fitness rather than the lethal capability she actually possessed. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes held a quiet intensity that most people mistook for shyness. The shuttle docked with a gentle thump, and Sarah gathered her single duffel bag. Everything she owned fit in that one bag, a habit born from years of rapid deployments and classified missions that required traveling light. As she walked through the airlock, she could hear the voices of other passengers discussing their excitement about training at the legendary facility. "I heard they wash out 60% in the first month," one young man was saying to his companion. "Yeah, but imagine the prestige if you make it through. Zenith graduates get first pick of assignments anywhere in human space," came the reply. Sarah listened without commenting. She had learned long ago that listening provided more valuable intelligence than talking. The corridor led to a processing center where dozens of new arrivals were being checked in and assigned to dormitories. The room buzzed with nervous energy and excited chatter. Behind the reception desk sat Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, a tall man with graying temples and the kind of bearing that marked career military officers. He had been processing new recruits for 15 years and prided himself on being able to assess a person's potential within minutes of meeting them. When Sarah approached his desk, Webb barely looked up from his tablet. Her file showed a standard infantry background with some redacted sections, nothing that stood out among the exceptional candidates who typically arrived at Zenith. "Chun, Sarah," he called out, not bothering to look at her directly. "Standard combat specialization track, I see. You'll be in dormitory block 7 with the other ground pounders." Sarah nodded politely. "Yes, sir. Where should I report for orientation?" Webb finally glanced up, taking in her unremarkable appearance and quiet demeanor. "Conference room 12, level 3. Orientation starts in 2 hours. Try not to get lost." He handed her a tablet with her schedule and room assignment, already turning his attention to the next person in line. Sarah accepted the dismissal gracefully, having grown accustomed to being underestimated. It was often an advantage, though she doubted it would matter much in a training environment. The corridors of Zenith Station were wide and well-lit, with viewing ports that offered spectacular views of the gas giant below. Sarah made her way to dormitory block 7, noting security cameras, emergency protocols, and the general layout out of habit. Her room was small but functional, with a single bed, desk, and storage locker. As she unpacked her few belongings, Sarah reflected on the chain of events that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had been leading a classified operation in the Tau Ceti system when everything went sideways. The mission was successful, but the political fallout meant she needed to be reassigned somewhere quiet while things cooled down. Admiral Rebecca Torres, one of the few people who knew Sarah's real background, had suggested Zenith Station. "You need advanced space combat training anyway," Torres had said. "Might as well get it while lying low. Just try not to show off too much." Sarah had laughed at that. Showing off had never been her style. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find 3 other cadets standing in the hallway. The one in front was tall and broad-shouldered with the kind of confident smile that suggested he was used to being the center of attention. "Hey there, new girl," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Jake Morrison, section leader for this block. These are my roommates, Tommy Liu and Derek Santos." Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the way his eyes assessed her. "Sarah Chun, nice to meet you. Where are you from, Sarah?" Tommy asked. He was shorter than Jake, with nervous energy and curious eyes. Earth mostly. Bounced around a lot with different assignments. Derek stepped forward, a stocky man with multiple tattoos visible on his arms. What kind of assignments? You look pretty young to have done much real combat. Standard infantry work. Nothing too exciting. The three men exchanged glances, and Sarah could see them categorizing her as another fresh-faced recruit who would probably wash out within weeks. Jake's smile became slightly condescending. Well, don't worry. Zenith has a way of separating the real warriors from the pretenders. If you need any advice, feel free to ask. We've all been here for a few months already. I appreciate that, Sarah said simply. After they left, Sarah finished unpacking and made her way to the orientation meeting. Conference room 12 was packed with about 50 new arrivals, all chattering nervously about what lay ahead. Sarah found a seat in the back corner, a position that allowed her to observe the room while keeping her back protected. The orientation was conducted by Major Patricia Vance, a severe-looking woman with steel-gray hair and intense blue eyes. She had the bearing of someone who had seen real combat and had little patience for weakness. "Welcome to Zenith Station," Major Vance began, her voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. "You are here because someone believed you had the potential to become elite space combat specialists. Over the next 6 months, we will determine if that belief was justified." She activated a holographic display showing the station's training facilities. Zenith Station houses the most advanced combat simulation systems in human space. You will face scenarios based on real engagements against hostile alien species, rogue human factions, and unknown threats from deep space. The training is designed to break you down and rebuild you as something better. A hand went up in the crowd. "Ma'am, what's the actual success rate for the program?" Major Vance's smile was sharp. 40% make it through the full program. Of those, only half are recommended for elite unit assignments. The rest return to standard fleet duty with additional training that makes them better than they were, but not elite. Another cadet raised his hand. "What determines who gets elite recommendations?" "Excellence. Not just in individual performance, but in leadership, decision-making under pressure, and the ability to adapt to impossible situations. Elite units don't need soldiers who follow orders blindly. They need warriors who can think, improvise, and lead others when everything goes wrong." Sarah listened carefully, recognizing the philosophy behind the training. It was similar to what she had experienced in SEAL training years ago, though the technology here was far more advanced. "Your first assessment will be tomorrow morning at 0600 hours, Major Vance continued. "Physical fitness, basic combat skills, and situational awareness. Those who fail to meet minimum standards will be reassigned immediately. I suggest you all get a good night's sleep." As the orientation ended, Sarah overheard conversations around her. Most of the cadets were discussing strategy for the assessment, comparing their backgrounds, and speculating about what would be required. She noticed that several groups had already formed based on shared backgrounds or perceived competence. Jake Morrison was holding court near the front of the room, regaling a group of admirers with stories about his performance in previous training exercises. "The key is understanding that this is all about demonstrating leadership potential," he was saying. "They want to see who can take charge when things get chaotic." Sarah made her way toward the exit, but Jake called out to her. "Hey, Chun, you should join our study group tonight. We're going over the training manual and sharing tips." She turned back with a polite smile. "Thanks for the offer, but I think I'll just review things on my own tonight." Derek snorted. "Probably a good idea. Some people need more time to prepare than others." The comment was clearly meant to be dismissive, but Sarah just nodded agreeably. "You're probably right. See you tomorrow." As she walked back to her quarters, Sarah encountered several other cadets in the corridors. Word had already spread about the new arrivals, and she could feel the appraising glances of more experienced trainees. A few nodded politely, while others looked right through her as if she wasn't worth noticing. In her room, Sarah did review the training materials, though not for the reasons the others might expect. She was looking for clues about the facility's security protocols, the backgrounds of the instructors, and any mentions of classified programs that might be running parallel to the standard training. Her tablet chimed with a message from Admiral Torres. Heard you arrived safely. Remember what we discussed about keeping a low profile. Your handler will make contact when appropriate. Sarah deleted the message immediately. Even at a training facility, operational security was paramount. She spent an hour doing a quiet workout in her small room, going through the stretching and strengthening routines that had kept her combat ready through years of missions. Her movements were precise and economical, each exercise serving multiple purposes for flexibility, strength, and muscle memory maintenance. Later that evening, she made her way to the communal recreation area on her floor. The room was buzzing with activity as cadets played games, watched entertainment feeds, or engaged in animated discussions about their backgrounds and expectations. Sarah found a quiet corner with a view of the room and settled in with a book, though she was actually observing the social dynamics playing out around her. Jake Morrison had established himself as an unofficial leader among the new arrivals, while several others were positioning themselves as his lieutenants. A group of more serious-minded cadets had gathered around a woman named Lieutenant Jessica Park, who had an impressive academic background in xenological studies and strategic planning. They were discussing theoretical approaches to multi-species conflict resolution. In another corner, a cluster of technical specialists were comparing notes about advanced weapons systems and ship engineering. They seemed more interested in the mechanical aspects of warfare than the human elements. What struck Sarah was how quickly people had sorted themselves into categories based on perceived strengths and background similarities. It was natural human behavior, but it also created blind spots that could be exploited in training scenarios. Tommy Lou approached her corner, holding 2 cups of coffee. Mind if I join you? You look like you might want some caffeine before tomorrow. Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully. Thanks. That's very thoughtful. Jake thinks you're probably going to wash out early, Tommy said quietly, glancing around to make sure they wouldn't be overheard. He says you don't have the command presence for elite training. What do you think? Sarah asked, genuinely curious about his assessment. Tommy studied her for a moment. I think Jake makes a lot of assumptions about people based on first impressions. He's probably right most of the time, but not always. What gave you a different impression? The way you move. You're always aware of who's around you and where the exits are. That's not nervous behavior. It's tactical awareness. And when you shook Jake's hand earlier, you positioned yourself so you could see the whole hallway. Most people don't do things like that unconsciously unless they've had training that made it automatic. Sarah was impressed by his observation skills. You're very perceptive. My background is in intelligence analysis. I notice patterns and inconsistencies. He paused. Your file says standard infantry, but some of your service record is classified. That's unusual for someone at your pay grade, unless you've been involved in special operations. Maybe I just had boring assignments in places they don't want to talk about, Sarah suggested with a smile. Tommy laughed. Maybe, but I don't think so. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the social dynamics continue to evolve around them. Sarah found herself liking Tommy's direct approach and analytical mindset. He would be a valuable ally if the training program encouraged teamwork. Around 2,200 hours, Major Vance's voice came over the station's communication system. All new arrivals report to your assigned quarters for rest period. Lights out in 30 minutes. Tomorrow's assessment begins at 0600 sharp in Training Bay 7. Do not be late. As the cadets began dispersing to their rooms, Jake Morrison made a point of stopping by Sarah's corner. Last chance to join our prep session, Chun. We're going to do some team-building exercises and strategy discussions. Thanks again, but I think I'm ready, Sarah replied. Derek shook his head dismissively. Your funeral. This isn't basic training where you can just muddle through on natural ability. Zenith separates the elite from the wannabes. After they left, Tommy lingered behind. For what it's worth, I think you'll do fine tomorrow. Jake's group spends a lot of time talking about leadership and strategy, but they haven't actually faced any real tests yet. Sometimes the quiet ones surprise everyone. Back in her room, Sarah went through her evening routine methodically. She checked her equipment, reviewed the facility layout one more time, and did a final series of stretches. As she settled into bed, she reflected on the day's interactions and what they revealed about the challenges ahead. The other cadets saw her as a quiet, unremarkable young woman who would probably struggle to keep up with the demands of elite training. That perception would be useful in the short term, allowing her to observe and assess without drawing unwanted attention to her capabilities. But eventually, she would have to perform. And when that time came, she would need to find a right balance between competence and restraint. Too little effort would result in failure and reassignment. Too much would raise questions about her background that she couldn't answer without compromising ongoing operations. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah's last conscious thought was about the assessment awaiting her in just a few hours. After years of real combat against enemies who wanted to kill her, she was curious to see what Zenith Station considered challenging enough to eliminate 60% of candidates. The next morning would be interesting indeed. Sarah woke at 0530 hours without needing an alarm, a habit ingrained from years of military service. The dormitory was still quiet, with most cadets probably sleeping until the last possible moment before the 0600 assessment. She dressed efficiently in the standard physical training uniform and made her way to the corridor. To her surprise, she found Tommy Lou already up and stretching near the viewport at the end of the hallway. He looked focused, but not nervous, going through what appeared to be a martial arts warm-up routine. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked as she approached. "I prefer to be ready early," Sarah replied. "Mind if I stretch here too?" "Not all. Company would be nice." They went through their warm-up routines in companionable silence, both clearly experienced in preparing for physical challenges. Sarah noticed that Tommy's movements had a precision that suggested formal training in combat disciplines, though his file listed him as an intelligence specialist. At 0545, other cadets began emerging from their rooms, most looking rushed and slightly panicked about the approaching deadline. Jake Morrison appeared with his two roommates, all of them projecting confident energy despite the early hour, ready to show them what real soldiers look like. Jake said to his group, loud enough for others to hear. Derek cracked his knuckles. "Been looking forward to this. Time to separate the warriors from the desk jockeys." As they made their way to Training Bay 7, Sarah observed the nervous energy building among the 50 new arrivals. Some were boasting about their physical fitness records. Others were quietly reviewing notes they had made about the assessment requirements. A few looked genuinely terrified about what they might face. Training Bay 7 turned out to be a massive space with multiple levels and various equipment stations. The bay could easily accommodate several hundred people, with obstacle courses, combat rings, weapons ranges, and simulation pods scattered throughout the area. The sheer scale of the facility was impressive, representing the kind of resources that humanity could marshal when committed to military excellence. Major Vance stood at the center of the bay with several other instructors, all wearing the distinctive black uniforms of Zenith Station's permanent staff. She checked her tablet as the cadets assembled, making notes about who arrived, when, and how they conducted themselves while waiting for instructions. "Form up in 5 ranks," she called out, spacing of 2 meters between each person. The cadets shuffled into formation, and Sarah noted how people positioned themselves. Jake Morrison managed to get himself into the front rank at the center, clearly intending to be visible to the instructors. Many others tried to hide in the middle or back, hoping to avoid attention. Sarah selected a position in the 3rd rank that gave her a clear view of the instructors while avoiding the spotlight. "Today's assessment has 4 components," Major Vance announced. "Physical fitness, combat skills, situational awareness, and problem-solving under pressure. Each component will be scored individually, and you must achieve passing marks in all 4 to continue in the program." She gestured to the various stations around the bay. "You will rotate through each station in groups of 10. The entire assessment will take approximately 4 hours. Questions?" A cadet in the front rank raised his hand. Ma'am, what constitutes a passing score? Performance in the top 70% of your group for each component. Since there are 50 of you, that means the bottom 15 will be eliminated today. Her smile was sharp. I suggest you bring your best effort to every station. The first group was called forward for the physical fitness assessment. Sarah watched as they went through a series of tests that included running, climbing, lifting, and agility challenges. The course was designed to test not just strength and endurance, but coordination and the ability to maintain performance under fatigue. Jake Morrison was in the first group, and he attacked each challenge with obvious confidence and considerable skill. He completed the running portion faster than anyone else and dominated the strength challenges. Derek Santos was equally impressive in the heavy lifting components, though he struggled more with the agility tests. When Sarah's group was called forward for the physical assessment, she approached each challenge with steady competence. She wasn't trying to set records or dominate the other participants, but rather to demonstrate solid capability across all areas. The running course wound through multiple levels of the training bay, incorporating stairs, narrow ledges, and obstacles that required quick decisions about route optimization. Sarah found a comfortable pace that allowed her to maintain awareness of her surroundings while making good time. She finished in the middle of her group's times, fast enough to be clearly competent, but not so fast as to draw special attention. The strength challenges included weighted carries, rope climbing, and resistance exercises designed to test functional fitness rather than raw power. Sarah's years of real-world training served her well here, as she had learned to maximize efficiency rather than just muscle through challenges. Her technique was smooth and economical, allowing her to complete each task with apparent ease while others struggled with form and endurance. Lieutenant Commander Alex Reed, one of the observing instructors, made notes as he watched her performance. "Chin, right?" he asked as she completed the rope climb. "Yes, sir. Your technique is very clean. What did you train?" "Various assignments, sir. You pick things up over time." Reed nodded, but Sarah could see his analytical mind filing away details about her movement patterns and technical proficiency. She would need to be more careful about displaying skills that didn't match her supposed background. The combat skill station was supervised by Master Chief Elena Vasquez, a compact woman with scarred hands and the kind of intensity that marked someone who had survived serious battles. The tests included hand-to-hand combat, weapons handling, and tactical movement under fire. Sarah's group was paired off for sparring matches, and she found herself facing a tall, athletic woman named Rachel Torres who had a background in military police. Rachel came at her aggressively, clearly intending to establish dominance quickly. The match lasted exactly 12 seconds. Sarah avoided Rachel's initial rush with a subtle sidestep, redirected her opponent's momentum with a gentle push, and followed through with a controlled takedown that left Rachel on her back wondering what had happened. The technique was simple and effective, but executed with a precision that made it look effortless. "Interesting," Master Chief Vasquez commented. "Torres, you're normally much more difficult to take down." "Chin, where did you learn that technique?" Sarah helped Rachel to her feet before answering. "Basic hand-to-hand training, Master Chief. I had a good instructor who emphasized using an opponent's energy against them." "Must have been a very good instructor," Vasquez replied, making notes on her tablet. "Let's see how you do with weapons handling." The weapons station included both projectile and energy-based systems, testing not just marksmanship, but tactical employment and technical understanding. Sarah approached each weapon with obvious familiarity, though she was careful to perform at a level consistent with standard military training rather than special operations expertise. With the plasma rifle, she achieved solid groupings at various ranges while demonstrating proper safety protocols and tactical reload procedures. Her scores were in the top third of her group, good enough to be clearly competent, but not exceptional enough to raise suspicions about advanced training. The situation became more complicated when they moved to the pistol range. The testing protocol required engaging multiple targets in a specific sequence while moving through a tactical course. Sarah had done similar drills thousands of times in real-world operations, and muscle memory almost took over before she caught herself. She forced herself to hesitate slightly before each target engagement, to take an extra moment for sight alignment, and to move with good technique rather than the fluid grace that came from extensive combat experience. Even with these deliberate limitations, she still finished with one of the better times in her group. Tommy Liu, who was shooting at the station next to her, glanced over with a raised eyebrow. "Nice shooting. That's some pretty advanced target acquisition." "Thanks," Sarah replied. "Just trying to focus on the fundamentals." The situational awareness station proved to be the most interesting challenge. Cadets were placed in a simulated environment and required to navigate through a series of scenarios while observers tracked their decision-making processes and tactical thinking. Sarah's scenario involved being dropped into a space station that was under attack by unknown hostiles. She had to assess the situation, identify threats and resources, and develop a plan for survival and mission accomplishment. The simulation was sophisticated enough to respond dynamically to her choices, creating a constantly evolving tactical situation. She approached the challenge methodically, first securing her immediate area and gathering information about the station's layout and the nature of the threat. The simulation included civilian personnel who needed to be protected, damaged systems that could be repaired or exploited, and multiple potential escape routes with different risk profiles. What impressed the observers was not just her tactical competence, but her ability to maintain situational awareness while making rapid decisions under pressure. She consistently chose options that balanced mission accomplishment with force protection, demonstrating the kind of strategic thinking that marked experienced combat leaders. Captain James Miller, who was supervising the situational awareness testing, found himself watching Sarah's performance with growing interest. Her decision-making patterns were remarkably sophisticated for someone with her supposed background, and her technical knowledge of space station systems was unusually comprehensive. "Chun, your performance in the simulation was excellent," he said as she emerged from the booth. "You demonstrated some very advanced tactical thinking." "Thank you, sir." The scenario was challenging but engaging. "Where did you develop your knowledge of station emergency protocols?" Sarah had anticipated this question. "I've served on several space installations, sir. Emergency procedures are pretty standard across most facilities." Miller nodded, but she could see him making mental notes. Her cover story was holding so far, but the quality of her performance was making people ask questions. The final station tested problem-solving under pressure through a series of technical and logical challenges that had to be completed within strict time limits. The tests were designed to evaluate not just intelligence, but the ability to think clearly when stressed and fatigued. By this point in the assessment, most cadets were showing signs of exhaustion and strain. Some were making careless mistakes, others were second-guessing themselves into paralysis. Sarah, however, felt more comfortable as the challenges intensified. Real combat had taught her to function effectively when tired, stressed, and under pressure. The technical challenges included repairing simulated equipment failures, solving complex tactical problems, and demonstrating knowledge of advanced weapons systems and spacecraft operations. Sarah worked through each challenge with steady competence, drawing on her extensive real-world experience while being careful not to demonstrate knowledge that would be inconsistent with her cover identity. One challenge required quickly calculating orbital mechanics for a combat intercept, something that would normally require extensive specialized training. Sarah solved it efficiently by applying principles she had learned during classified missions, but she made sure to show her work in a way that suggested good basic training rather than advanced expertise. When all groups had completed the four-station rotation, Major Vance called them back into formation for the results. The atmosphere was tense as cadets waited to learn who would be continuing in the program and who would be reassigned to regular fleet duty. The following cadets have achieved passing scores in all four assessment areas, Major Vance announced, consulting her tablet. When your name is called, step forward and report to Briefing Room 12 for further instructions. The first name called was Jake Morrison, which surprised no one. He had dominated the physical challenges and performed well in the other areas, exactly what everyone expected from someone who projected such confidence. Other names followed. Rachel Torres, despite her quick defeat in sparring. Tommy Liu, whose intelligence background had served him well in the technical challenges. Derek Santos, whose brute strength had compensated for weaker performance in other areas. When Sarah's name was called, she felt a mixture of relief and concern. Relief that her performance had been good enough to continue, concern that she had performed well enough to draw attention from the instructors. As she stepped forward with the other successful candidates, Sarah caught Major Vance watching her with an expression of curiosity. The assessment had revealed more about her capabilities than she had intended, and she would need to be more careful about managing her performance in future challenges. Of the 50 cadets who had started the day, 35 had achieved passing scores. The 15 who were eliminated looked devastated, but Sarah noticed that several accepted their failure with dignity and professionalism. Military service taught people to deal with disappointment and move forward constructively. In Briefing Room 12, the successful cadets were given their schedules for the next phase of training. The program would intensify significantly with advanced tactical simulations, leadership challenges, and specialized technical training designed to push them to their limits. "Congratulations on surviving your first day," Major Vance said as she handed out the training schedules. "But remember, this was just an initial screening. The real training begins tomorrow, and it will be far more demanding than anything you face today." She paused, looking around the room at the assembled cadets. "Some of you demonstrated exceptional potential today. Others showed solid competence that could be developed into excellence. All of you will be challenged in ways you cannot currently imagine." As the briefing concluded, cadets began forming groups and discussing their performance. Sarah noticed that the social dynamics were already shifting based on the assessment results. Those who had performed exceptionally were being treated with new respect, while those who had barely passed were being subtly marginalized. Jake Morrison was holding court again, now with additional credibility based on his strong performance. Today was just the beginning, he was saying to his growing group of followers. The real test is going to be how we perform as leaders when things get complicated. Tommy Liu approached Sarah as they left the briefing room. "Congratulations on making it through. I thought you might, despite what some people were saying." "Thanks. You did well too, especially in the technical challenges." "Intelligence training has its advantages," he said with a grin. "Want to grab dinner in the mess hall? I have a feeling we're going to need our energy for whatever they have planned tomorrow." As they walked through the corridors toward the mess hall, Sarah reflected on the day's events. She had successfully navigated the first major hurdle, but the assessment had also revealed that maintaining her cover while performing competently would be more challenging than anticipated. The instructors were clearly experienced in evaluating military personnel, and several had already noted inconsistencies between her supposed background and her demonstrated capabilities. She would need to find ways to explain her competence without revealing the classified nature of her real experience. More importantly, the social dynamics among the cadets were becoming more complex. Jake Morrison was establishing himself as a leader, but his assessment of other people was based on superficial criteria that missed important capabilities. Tommy Liu had proven himself to be observant and analytically minded, making him potentially valuable as an ally, but also dangerous if he dug too deeply into her background. The next phase of training would bring new challenges and new opportunities to either blend in or stand out. Sarah would need to walk a careful line between competence and invisibility, proving herself worthy of advanced training while avoiding the kind of attention that could compromise her real mission. As they entered the mess hall and joined a line for dinner, Sarah was already planning how to approach the challenges ahead. The game was becoming more complex, but she had survived far more dangerous situations through careful planning and adaptability. Tomorrow would bring new tests, but tonight she could enjoy the satisfaction of having successfully completed the first phase of her assignment at Zenith Station. 3 weeks into the advanced training program, Sarah had established a careful balance between competence and camouflage. She performed well enough to avoid remedial instruction while staying below the threshold that would draw unwanted attention from the faculty. Her strategy was working, but the increasing complexity of the training scenarios was making it harder to maintain. The morning briefing was held in the station's primary tactical center, a massive room dominated by holographic displays showing various star systems and potential conflict zones. Major Vance stood before the assembled cadets, her expression more serious than usual. "Today marks a significant escalation in your training," she announced. "Until now, you have been working on individual skills and basic team coordination. Starting today, you will face complex multi-phase operations that require advanced tactical thinking and leadership under extreme pressure." The room buzzed with nervous energy as 35 cadets absorbed this information. Over the past 3 weeks, the group had developed distinct social hierarchies and alliances. Jake Morrison continued to lead the largest faction, while several smaller groups had formed around other high-performing individuals. Sarah had intentionally remained somewhat peripheral to these alliances, associating most closely with Tommy Liu and a few other cadets who valued competence over politics. This positioning had allowed her to observe group dynamics while avoiding the kind of scrutiny that came with leadership roles. Your first advanced simulation will test your ability to plan and execute a complex military operation with incomplete information and evolving objectives, Major Vance continued. You will be divided into teams of 7 cadets each. Each team will be assigned a different scenario, but all scenarios are based on real military operations that tested the limits of human capability. Captain Miller stepped forward with a tablet displaying team assignments. Team leaders will be selected based on your performance evaluations over the past 3 weeks. These individuals have demonstrated tactical competence and leadership potential. Sarah felt a moment of concern as Miller began reading the assignments. Her performance had been carefully calibrated, but the instructors were experienced evaluators who might have noticed subtleties she hadn't intended to reveal. Team Alpha will be led by Cadet Morrison, Miller announced, which surprised no one. Jake had been a standout performer in most exercises and naturally attracted followers. Team Bravo will be led by Cadet Park, he continued, naming the academically accomplished woman who had gathered the more intellectually oriented cadets around her. Team Charlie will be led by Cadet Santos, Miller said, selecting Derek Santos, whose aggressive approach had proven effective in several combat simulations. Team Delta will be led by Cadet Torres, he announced, choosing Rachel Torres, who had recovered from her initial sparring defeat to demonstrate consistent competence across multiple disciplines. And Team Echo will be led by Cadet Chun. Sarah felt every eye in the room turn toward her as a collective murmur of surprise rippled through the assembled cadets. She had successfully avoided attention for 3 weeks, but apparently the instructors had been paying closer attention to her performance than she realized. Tommy Liu caught her eye and gave her a small smile and nod of approval. Several other cadets looked puzzled, clearly wondering what the instructors had seen in the quiet woman who rarely spoke up during debriefings. Jake Morrison's expression was particularly interesting, showing a mixture of surprise and something that might have been respect. He had probably assumed that his own dominance in the visible aspects of training meant the instructors shared his assessment of other cadets' potential. Team assignments are posted on your tablets, Captain Miller continued. You have 2 hours to meet with your teams, review your assigned scenario, and develop your operational plan. Execution begins at 1,400 hours in Simulation Bay Delta. As the cadets dispersed to find their team members, Sarah consulted her tablet to see who had been assigned to Team Echo. The list included Tommy Liu, which was fortunate, plus 5 other cadets she knew less well, but who had all demonstrated solid competence in various exercises. The team gathered in a small briefing room where Sarah's scenario packet was waiting. As team leader, she was the only one authorized to open it initially, though she would brief the others once she understood the scope of their mission. "Before we dive into the scenario," she said to her assembled team, "I want to establish how we're going to work together. Leadership in a complex operation requires input from everyone, so I want to hear your thoughts and expertise throughout the planning process." Marcus Webb, a technical specialist who had excelled in the engineering challenges, nodded approvingly. "That's a good approach." Some of the other team leaders seemed to think they need to have all the answers themselves. "Everyone has different strengths," Sarah replied. "Our job is to leverage all of them effectively." She opened the scenario packet and began reading the mission briefing aloud. Operation Thunder Ridge. Your team is tasked with conducting a rescue operation on a hostile planet where a critical intelligence asset has been captured by enemy forces. The asset possesses information vital to preventing a major enemy offensive. The scenario was complex, involving orbital insertion, ground combat, urban warfare, hostage rescue, and extraction under fire. The planet had multiple environmental hazards, civilian populations that could be hostile or friendly, and enemy forces with unknown capabilities and numbers. Initial intelligence is limited, Sarah continued reading. Satellite reconnaissance has identified the general area where the asset is being held, but exact location, facility layout, and security arrangements are unknown. Local weather conditions include frequent electromagnetic storms that will interfere with communications and targeting systems. Tommy Lou whistled softly. That's a lot of variables to account for. And if the weather affects communications, we'll need to plan for operating with minimal coordination between elements. "What's our available resources?" asked Lisa Chun, a logistics specialist who had proven adept at resource management challenges. Sarah consulted the briefing materials. One dropship for insertion and extraction, standard squad-level weapons and equipment, basic reconnaissance drones, and limited orbital support that may be unavailable during electromagnetic storms. The team spent the next hour analyzing the scenario and identifying key challenges. The mission required careful coordination between multiple phases, with success depending on adaptability and good contingency planning. Sarah found herself naturally falling into the role of team leader, but she was careful to encourage input from all team members and to avoid displaying the kind of tactical expertise that would reveal her special operations background. "Our biggest challenge is the intelligence gap," she said as they worked through possible approaches. "We need to gather more information once we're on the ground, but we also need to be prepared to act quickly if the situation deteriorates." "What if we plan for a phased approach?" suggested Elena Rodriguez, whose background in military police had given her experience with urban operations. "Initial reconnaissance to gather intelligence, followed by a coordinated assault once we understand the target better." "That makes sense," Tommy agreed, "but we need contingencies if the reconnaissance phase goes wrong or if we discover the situation is different than expected." They developed a multi-phase plan that emphasized flexibility and redundancy. The initial insertion would establish a base of operations, while small teams gathered intelligence about the target facility. Based on what they learned, they would either execute a carefully planned rescue operation or improvise based on immediate opportunities and threats. Sarah was impressed by her team's tactical thinking and collaborative approach. They had avoided the trap of trying to plan for every possible contingency while still developing robust procedures for dealing with unexpected developments. When the 2-hour planning period ended, all 5 teams reported to Simulation Bay Delta for mission execution. The bay had been configured as a sophisticated holographic environment that would immerse them completely in their assigned scenarios. Sarah's team was escorted to their designated simulation pod, a chamber equipped with neural interface technology that would make the exercise feel completely real while allowing instructors to monitor performance and safety. The technology was similar to what Sarah had experienced during classified training, though she was careful not to let that familiarity show. "Remember," she told her team as they prepared to enter the simulation, "plans are important, but adaptability is crucial. If something unexpected happens, communicate clearly, and we'll work through it together." The simulation began with their team aboard the dropship approaching the target planet. Through the pod's neural interface, Sarah could feel the vibration of the ship's engines and see the hostile planet growing larger through the viewports. The level of sensory detail was remarkable, creating genuine stress responses that would test their ability to function under pressure. Electromagnetic storm approaching from the southeast, reported their pilot through the comm system. We have approximately 15 minutes of clear weather for the insertion. Sarah made the immediate decision to accelerate their timeline. All teams, prepare for early insertion. We'll establish the base camp and begin reconnaissance immediately rather than waiting for optimal conditions. The insertion went smoothly, with their team landing in a rocky valley approximately 2 kilometers from the suspected target location. The landscape was harsh and alien, with strange vegetation and an atmosphere that required environmental suits for human survival. Rodriguez and Webb established perimeter security, Sarah ordered. Liu and Chun set up communications and start analyzing the intelligence package. Martinez and I will conduct initial reconnaissance toward the target. The next several hours of simulation time compressed into 90 minutes of real time, during which Sarah's team methodically gathered intelligence, identified the enemy facility, and developed a detailed plan for the rescue operation. What impressed the observing instructors was not just the team's tactical competence, but their ability to adapt when their initial assumptions proved incorrect. The intelligence asset was being held in a more heavily defended facility than expected, and the enemy had capabilities that hadn't been mentioned in the original briefing. Sarah found herself having to balance her real tactical experience with the limitations of her supposed training. When the team discovered that the facility had advanced detection systems that would make a stealth approach impossible, she guided them toward a solution that was tactically sound but not so sophisticated as to raise questions about her background. We need to create a diversion that draws their security forces away from the main facility, she proposed during their final planning session. If we can make them think the main attack is coming from the east, we can approach the actual target from the west during the confusion. The execution phase of the mission was intense and chaotic, exactly what the instructors intended. Sarah's team had to deal with equipment failures, unexpected enemy reinforcements, and civilians who were caught in the crossfire. Throughout the crisis, Sarah demonstrated the kind of calm leadership that comes from extensive combat experience. Though she was careful to attribute her decisions to good training and logical thinking rather than intuition born from real-world operations. The mission succeeded, but barely. They rescued the intelligence asset and extracted under fire, but several team members were wounded during the operation, and their extraction was complicated by the return of electromagnetic storms that disrupted their communications with orbital support. When the simulation ended and they emerged from the pod, Sarah's team was exhausted but exhilarated. They had faced a genuinely challenging scenario and succeeded through teamwork and adaptability. That was incredible, Elena Rodriguez said as they were escorted to a debriefing room. I've never experienced anything that realistic before. The neural interface technology makes it feel completely real, Tommy Liu agreed. I actually thought I was going to die when that enemy patrol almost spotted us. Captain Miller and Major Vance were waiting in the debriefing room with detailed performance analyses. Each team member would receive individual feedback, but they would also be evaluated as a team based on their overall mission success and tactical effectiveness. Team Echo demonstrated excellent tactical planning and execution under pressure. Major Vance began. Your ability to adapt when initial assumptions proved incorrect was particularly impressive. She turned to Sarah specifically. Cadet Chun, your leadership was exemplary. You managed to maintain unit cohesion and effectiveness while dealing with multiple unexpected challenges. Your decision-making under pressure was consistently sound. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and concern at the praise. She had successfully led her team through a complex operation, but the quality of her performance might draw more attention than was advisable for maintaining her cover. Your tactical innovations were particularly noteworthy, Captain Miller added, consulting his tablet. The diversion strategy you developed showed sophisticated understanding of enemy psychology and battlefield dynamics. Where did you develop that level of tactical thinking? This was exactly the kind of question Sarah had been hoping to avoid. Thank you, sir. I try to think through the problem logically and consider what approaches were most likely to succeed given our limitations. Miller nodded, but she could see him making mental notes. Her performance had been too good, revealing capabilities that were inconsistent with her supposed background in standard infantry operations. The debriefing continued for another hour, with detailed analysis of each phase of the mission and feedback on areas for improvement. When it concluded, the teams were dismissed for the day, but Sarah noticed that several instructors remained behind for what appeared to be a private discussion about the day's exercises. As Team Echo walked back toward their quarters, Tommy Lou fell in a step beside Sarah. That was outstanding leadership today. You kept us focused and effective even when everything was falling apart. Everyone contributed, Sarah replied. It was a team effort. Maybe, but leadership makes the difference between a team that functions well and one that falls apart under pressure. Jake Morrison's team had technical problems and ended up failing their extraction because they couldn't adapt quickly enough. This was concerning news. If other teams had struggled with similar scenarios while Sarah's team succeeded clearly, it would make her performance stand out even more prominently in the instructor's evaluations. That evening, Sarah found herself replaying the day's events and considering the implications for her continued cover. The simulation had been a genuine test of leadership and tactical thinking, and she had performed well by any reasonable standard. But the quality of her performance was attracting exactly the kind of attention she needed to avoid. She was also beginning to realize that the training program was more sophisticated than she had initially understood. The scenarios were based on real military operations, and the instructors were clearly experienced combat veterans who could recognize advanced capabilities when they saw them. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah reflected on the challenge of maintaining her cover while proving herself worthy of elite training. The simulation had demonstrated that she could lead effectively and think tactically under pressure, but it had also revealed more about her background than was prudent. The next phase of training would require even more careful calibration of her performance. She needed to continue demonstrating competence while finding ways to explain her capabilities that didn't raise questions about her real background. But first, she needed to understand why the instructors had selected her as a team leader when she had been so careful to avoid standing out. Either her performance had been more obvious than she realized, or the faculty at Zenith Station was more perceptive than she had anticipated. Either way, the game was becoming more complex, and the stakes were getting higher with each passing day. The emergency klaxon's piercing wail jolted Sarah from sleep at 0347 hours. Red emergency lighting bathed the dormitory corridors as cadets stumbled from their quarters, trying to process what was happening. The klaxon pattern indicated a genuine station emergency, not a training exercise. All personnel to emergency stations, came Major Vance's voice over the communication system. This is not a drill. Report to your assigned emergency positions immediately. Sarah was already moving, her combat instincts taking over before her conscious mind fully processed the situation. She grabbed her emergency kit and joined the stream of cadets rushing through the corridors toward their assigned emergency stations. The station's emergency protocols assigned cadets to support positions throughout Zenith Station, providing additional manpower for damage control, evacuation assistance, and security operations. Sarah had been assigned to Auxiliary Damage Control Team 7, which was responsible for maintaining life support systems in the residential sectors. As she made her way to the Emergency Command Center, Sarah could see that something serious had happened. Station personnel were moving with urgent purpose, and the emergency displays showed multiple system warnings that indicated significant damage to critical infrastructure. In the Emergency Command Center, Lieutenant Commander Webb was coordinating response efforts while Major Vance briefed the arriving cadets on the situation. At 0340 hours, we suffered a catastrophic failure in the primary power distribution system, Major Vance announced to the assembled cadets. The failure has resulted in life support degradation in sectors 7 through 12, and we have lost primary communications with 3 civilian research vessels that were docked for crew rotation. The implications hit Sarah immediately. Power distribution failures could cascade through interconnected systems, potentially leaving sections of the station without life support. If civilian vessels were affected, there could be people in immediate danger. Cadet teams will support station personnel in damage assessment and repair operations, Major Vance continued. This is a real emergency with real consequences. Your training has prepared you for situations like this, but remember that actual lives depend on your performance. Sarah was assigned to a team led by Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos, a veteran engineer with 20 years of experience in space station operations. The team included 4 other cadets and 2 station technicians, and their mission was to assess damage in Sector 9 and restore life support if possible. As they made their way through the station towards Sector 9, Chief Santos briefed them on what they might encounter. Power distribution failures can cause cascading system failures throughout a sector. Our job is to identify what's working, what's not, and what can be fixed with available resources. The damage in Sector 9 was extensive. Emergency lighting provided minimal illumination, and the air recycling systems were operating at reduced capacity. Worse, the sector housed quarters for visiting researchers and their families, including several children who were part of a long-term xenobiology study. Life support is degrading faster than expected, reported one of the station technicians after checking his instruments. We have maybe 4 hours before atmospheric conditions become dangerous for extended exposure. Chief Santos studied her tablet, reviewing system schematics and available resources. The primary circulation pumps are offline, and the backup systems are overloaded. We need to either restore primary power or find another way to maintain atmospheric circulation. Sarah studied the situation while the team conducted their initial assessment. Her extensive technical training, gained through classified special operations missions, allowed her to understand the system interconnections more quickly than her supposed background would suggest. The problem was complex, but not unsolvable. The power distribution failure had shut down primary systems, but there were backup connections that could be rerouted to restore at least minimal functionality. However, implementing such a solution would require technical knowledge and leadership that might reveal more about her background than was wise. Chief Santos, she said carefully, what if we could reroute power from the secondary research labs? They're not currently occupied, and their power requirements are much lower than residential life support. Santos looked at her with surprise. That's not a standard procedure. Cadet Chen, how do you know about secondary lab power systems? Sarah had to think quickly. I spent time on research stations during my previous assignments. Chief, the basic principles are similar across most space installations. Even if that would work, the rerouting would require extensive rewiring and system modifications. We don't have the time or resources for that kind of operation. But Sarah could see a solution that would work faster and more efficiently than Santos realized. The key was understanding how the station's automated systems could be reprogrammed to handle the rerouting rather than doing it manually. What if we didn't do it manually, she suggested. The station's automated systems can handle the rerouting if we input the right parameters. We just need to convince the computer that we're implementing an authorized emergency protocol. This caught the attention of Tommy Liu, who was part of a nearby team working on similar problems. Chun, that would require access to station administrative systems that cadets aren't supposed to know about. Sarah realized she had revealed too much, but people's lives were at stake, and she couldn't hold back when a solution was available. Sometimes you pick up information from observing how experienced personnel handle emergency situations. Chief Santos was studying her tablet, reviewing Sarah's suggestions. It's unconventional, but the basic approach is sound. If we can implement the rerouting quickly enough, it would buy us time to work on more permanent solutions. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah found herself increasingly taking the initiative in solving technical problems that the team encountered. Her suggestions were consistently effective, but they also demonstrated a level of technical knowledge and systematic thinking that was difficult to explain with her supposed background. When they successfully restored life support to Sector 9 ahead of schedule, Chief Santos pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. "Cadet Chun, I've been working space station engineering for 20 years, and I've never seen a junior enlisted person with your level of technical intuition. Your solutions today were not just effective, they were sophisticated. Where exactly did you get this training?" Sarah knew she was walking a dangerous line, but she also knew that the emergency wasn't over and other teams might need her capabilities to save lives. "Chief, I've always been good with technical systems, and I've been fortunate to work with some very skilled engineers during my career. Sometimes you learn more than what's in the manual." Santos nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't entirely satisfied with that explanation. "Well, whatever your background, you've proven yourself today. I'm going to recommend you for advanced technical training when this crisis is over." The next several hours were a blur of emergency response activities as teams throughout the station worked to restore full functionality. Sarah found herself being called upon by multiple teams who had heard about her technical capabilities, and each successful intervention made it harder to explain her competence with standard infantry training. The turning point came when one of the civilian research vessels, the CNS Meridian, reported that their life support systems had failed completely, and they had less than an hour before atmospheric conditions became lethal. The ship carried a crew of 12, including 2 families with young children. Station personnel were struggling to devise a rescue plan that could be implemented quickly enough to save lives. The Meridian's docking clamps had been damaged in the initial power failure, making it impossible to establish a direct connection for evacuation. Worse, the electromagnetic interference from the power system failures was preventing the use of standard rescue shuttles. Sarah listened to the emergency briefings and realized that conventional approaches weren't going to work within the time constraints. But she also knew that there was a solution, though implementing it would require her to reveal capabilities that she had been carefully concealing. Major Vance was coordinating the rescue efforts from the main emergency command center, and Sarah could see the frustration and desperation on her face as each proposed solution proved inadequate. "Ma'am," Sarah said, approaching Major Vance during a brief lull in the planning session, "I might have an alternative approach to the Meridian rescue." Vance looked at her with surprise. "Cadet Chun, what do you have in mind?" "The electromagnetic interference is preventing normal shuttle operations, but it wouldn't affect a manual EVA approach using magnetic grappling equipment. A small team could cross to the Meridian, stabilize their life support temporarily, and establish an evacuation tether for personnel transfer. That's extremely dangerous, Cadet. The radiation exposure alone would be significant, and manual EVA operations and electromagnetic interference require advanced training that cadets don't typically receive." Sarah knew she was about to cross a line that she couldn't uncross. "Ma'am, I volunteer to lead the EVA team. I have a necessary experience to make it work." The silence in the command center was profound as everyone turned to stare at the quiet cadet who had just volunteered for what amounted to a suicide mission. "Cadet Chun," Major Vance said slowly, "what exactly is your real background? Because standard infantry training doesn't prepare someone for advanced EVA operations in hostile conditions." Sarah looked around the command center, seeing the faces of people she had come to respect over the past month of training. Tommy Liu was watching her with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. Chief Santos had an expression that suggested she had suspected something like this. Even Jake Morrison looked impressed, though also puzzled by this revelation about someone he had dismissed as unremarkable. "Ma'am, there are aspects of my background that are classified, but I do have the training necessary to attempt this rescue. If we don't act soon, 12 people are going to die, including children who have nothing to do with military operations." Major Vance studied Sarah's face for a long moment, clearly recognizing that they had reached a decision point. Captain Miller, get me Admiral Torres on a secure channel immediately. I think we need some clarification about Cadet Chen's actual qualifications. While they waited for the secure communication to be established, Sarah began reviewing the technical requirements for the rescue operation. The EVA approach would require precise coordination and careful management of limited resources, but it was achievable if executed properly. Chun, Tommy Lu said quietly, whatever your real background is, you've been holding back during training, haven't you? Everyone holds back to some degree, Sarah replied. But you're right that I have more experience than my file might suggest. How much more experience? Before Sarah could answer, Major Vance's communication with Admiral Torres was established. The conversation was brief and conducted in low tones that Sarah couldn't overhear, but she could see Major Vance's expression changing from skepticism to understanding to something that might have been respect. When the communication ended, Major Vance looked at Sarah with completely different eyes. It seems we have a SEAL operator in our midst, masquerading as a standard infantry cadet. Admiral Torres has authorized me to utilize your real capabilities for this emergency operation. The revelation sent a shock wave through the command center. SEAL operators were legendary figures in human space forces, with capabilities and training that bordered on mythical. The idea that one had been quietly training alongside regular cadets for a month was almost impossible to believe. Holy shit, whispered Derek Santos, before catching himself and looking embarrassed about his language in front of senior officers. That explains a lot, Chief Santos said with a shake of her head. I knew there was something unusual about your technical knowledge. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Her cover was blown, but it also meant she could now use her real capabilities to save lives. Ma'am, if I'm cleared to operate at full capability, I'll need specific equipment and a team that can support advanced EVA operations. The window for successful rescue is closing rapidly. Major Vance nodded. You have full authorization. What do you need? Over the next 20 minutes, Sarah transformed from a quiet cadet into a special operations professional coordinating a complex rescue mission. Her calm competence and detailed knowledge of advanced procedures left no doubt about her real background and capabilities. The rescue operation itself was a testament to human courage and technical excellence. Sarah led a 4-person EVA team across the dangerous space between Zenith Station and the crippled Meridian, established emergency life support, and coordinated the evacuation of all 12 personnel to safety. When the last civilian was safely aboard Zenith Station, Sarah found herself surrounded by cadets and station personnel who looked at her with new understanding. The quiet, unremarkable woman they had known for a month had revealed herself to be one of humanity's elite warriors. I have so many questions, Tommy Lu said as they finally stood down from emergency status. How long were you planning to maintain the masquerade? As long as necessary, Sarah replied. But some things are more important than operational security. Jake Morrison approached her with an expression of genuine respect. I owe you an apology, Chun. I completely misjudged your capabilities. No apology necessary. You evaluated based on available information, which is exactly what a good leader should do. As the immediate crisis subsided and normal station operations resumed, Sarah realized that her time at Zenith Station would now be very different. Her real identity and capabilities were known, which would change how she was perceived and treated by both cadets and instructors. But she had also learned something important about herself during the emergency. Despite years of classified operations and the necessity of maintaining operational security, she was still fundamentally motivated by the desire to protect innocent people and serve something larger than herself. The next phase of her assignment would bring new challenges, but Sarah was confident that she had made the right choice when lives hung in the balance. Sometimes being a hero meant revealing who you really were. The formal hearing convened 3 days after the emergency, in Zenith Station's primary briefing amphitheater. Sarah stood at attention before a panel of senior officers that included not only the station's command staff, but also Admiral Rebecca Torres, who had arrived personally to address the situation created by Sarah's cover being blown during the rescue operation. The amphitheater was filled with cadets, instructors, and station personnel, all of whom had requested permission to attend what had become an unprecedented review of a classified operative's performance in an open training environment. The rescue of the Meridian's crew had become legendary within hours, and everyone wanted to understand how a Navy SEAL had been training among them undetected for over a month. Admiral Torres, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone who had commanded fleets in combat, looked down at Sarah from the panel with an expression that mixed official sternness with personal pride. Petty Officer First Class Chun, she began, using Sarah's actual rank rather than her cadet designation. You are here to address the circumstances that led to the compromise of your classified assignment to this training facility, and to account for your actions during the station emergency of 3 days ago. Sarah's response was crisp and professional. Yes, ma'am. I am prepared to provide a full account of my actions and decisions. Before we proceed, Admiral Torres continued, I want to address the broader audience. She turned to face the assembled cadets and staff. What you will learn today is that the woman you have known as Cadet Sarah Chun is actually one of humanity's most decorated special operations personnel. Her presence here was part of a classified program, but recent events have made it necessary to declassify certain aspects of her background. A murmur of excitement and curiosity rippled through the audience. Even those who had witnessed the rescue operation were eager to learn the full scope of Sarah's real background and capabilities. Major Vance stepped forward with a tablet containing Sarah's actual service record. Petty Officer Chin's operational history includes 16 classified missions across 7-star systems. She has been decorated for valor on 4 separate occasions, including the Distinguished Service Cross for actions during the Kepler incident that prevented a full-scale alien invasion of human space. The amphitheater fell silent as the magnitude of those achievements sank in. The Kepler incident was known publicly only as a diplomatic crisis that had been resolved without military action. Learning that it had actually been a near-catastrophic invasion attempt that was stopped by Special Operations Intervention was shocking news. Her technical qualifications include advanced space warfare tactics, xenological combat operations, deep space reconnaissance, and emergency response coordination, Major Vance continued. She is qualified to command special operations units up to company level and has been recommended for officer training on multiple occasions. Captain Miller added his assessment of Sarah's performance during the training program. Despite operating undercover with significant restrictions on her demonstrated capabilities, Petty Officer Chin consistently displayed leadership potential and tactical excellence. Her team's performance during advanced simulations was exceptional, even though she was deliberately restraining her own contributions. Admiral Torres turned back to Sarah. Petty Officer Chun, explain your decision-making process during the station emergency, specifically your choice to reveal classified capabilities despite operational security protocols. Sarah had spent considerable time preparing for this question, knowing it would be central to any evaluation of her conduct. Ma'am, operational security is critically important, but the preservation of innocent life takes precedence when a conflict arises. The emergency rescue required capabilities that only my background provided, and I judged that the mission of saving 12 civilian lives, including children, outweighed the compromise of my cover identity. Were there alternative approaches that might have preserved operational security while still attempting the rescue? No, ma'am. The electromagnetic interference and structural damage eliminated conventional rescue approaches. The manual EVA operation required technical knowledge and experience that my cover identity could not plausibly possess. Attempting the rescue while maintaining cover would have significantly reduced the probability of success. Admiral Torres nodded approvingly. Your decision demonstrates the kind of tactical and moral judgment that we expect from special operations personnel. The rescue was successful, all civilian lives were saved, and station damage was minimized through your technical contributions to emergency response efforts. She paused, consulting her notes. However, the compromise of your cover assignment does create complications for ongoing operations. We need to determine how to proceed with your training and future assignments. Lieutenant Commander Webb, who had initially processed Sarah's arrival at the station, spoke up from the panel. Ma'am, if I may offer a perspective from the training staff. Despite the deception about her background, Petty Officer Chen's conduct throughout the program has been exemplary. She demonstrated genuine respect for her fellow cadets, never used her superior capabilities to humiliate or dominate others, and consistently contributed to unit cohesion and morale. This drew nods of agreement from several instructors who had observed Sarah's interactions with other cadets over the past month. Master Chief Vasquez added her assessment. Her leadership during the crisis was outstanding. She coordinated emergency response efforts across multiple teams while maintaining safety protocols and operational effectiveness. Most importantly, she earned the respect and trust of personnel at all levels through her actions, not just a revealed background. Tommy Liu raised his hand from the cadets section and was recognized to speak. Ma'am, if I may represent the perspective of the cadets who trained with Petty Officer Chun. Learning about her real background explains a lot of things we had noticed but couldn't understand. But even knowing what we know now, we remember her as someone who was helpful, respectful, and genuinely interested in everyone's success. She never made any of us feel inferior or incompetent. Jake Morrison stood and requested permission to speak. Ma'am, I initially misjudged Petty Officer Chun based on superficial assessments. But looking back at her performance with a knowledge of her real background, what impresses me most is how she managed to be an effective leader and team member while operating under such significant constraints. That shows remarkable discipline and professionalism. Admiral Torres looked pleased by these testimonials from both staff and cadets. These assessments are consistent with Petty Officer Chen's personnel evaluations throughout her career. She has consistently demonstrated the ability to work effectively with personnel at all levels while maintaining operational security and mission focus. She turned back to Sarah. Given the circumstances, we have several options for proceeding with your career development. You could be immediately assigned to a special operations unit commensurate with your experience and capabilities. You could be fast-tracked through officer training and recommended for command positions. Or you could complete the Zenith Station program, providing valuable insights to the training staff while continuing your own professional development. Sarah had been considering these possibilities since the rescue operation. Ma'am, I would like to complete the Zenith Station program. I believe there is value in experiencing the full curriculum, both for my own development and for potential contributions to future training improvements. Even though your classmates now know your real background, that will change the dynamics significantly. Yes, ma'am, but I think those changes might actually be beneficial for everyone involved. The other cadets can learn from observing advanced techniques and decision-making processes, while I can gain insights into how to better train and mentor junior personnel. Major Vance leaned forward with interest. Are you suggesting a modified program where you would serve as both student and instructor? Something like that, ma'am. I could participate in training exercises at my actual capability level while providing real-time mentoring and tactical instruction to other cadets. It would be like having an embedded special operations advisor for advanced training scenarios. Admiral Torres exchanged glances with the other panel members, and Sarah could see them considering the implications of this proposal. It would be an unprecedented arrangement, but it could provide significant benefits for training effectiveness. The approach has merit, Captain Miller said thoughtfully. Advanced simulations would be more realistic and challenging if they included a participant with actual special operations experience. and the other cadets would benefit from observing how elite operators think and react under pressure. There are security considerations, Lieutenant Commander Webb pointed out. Some training scenarios involve classified information or sensitive techniques. Petty Officer Chen already has the necessary security clearances, Admiral Torres replied. In fact, her clearance level is higher than most of the instructional staff. After 15 minutes of discussion among the panel members, Admiral Torres announced their decision. Petty Officer Chun will complete the Zenith Station program under a modified curriculum that acknowledges her actual background and capabilities. She will participate in advanced training scenarios as both student and instructor, providing mentorship to fellow cadets while continuing her own professional development. The decision drew spontaneous applause from the assembled cadets and staff. Sarah felt a wave of relief and anticipation as she realized she would be able to complete her assignment while operating openly at her actual capability level. However, Admiral Torres continued, "This arrangement comes with additional responsibilities. You will be expected to contribute to curriculum development, assist with instruction of advanced tactical concepts, and serve as a leadership example for other cadets. Your performance will be evaluated not just on your own achievements, but on how effectively you help others reach their potential." "I understand, ma'am, and I accept those responsibilities." The hearing concluded with administrative details about Sarah's new status and modified training schedule. As the audience dispersed, she found herself surrounded by cadets eager to ask questions and learn from her experience. "What was it really like during the Kepler incident?" asked Derek Santos. "How did you manage to stay in character for so long without revealing your background?" Tommy Lou wanted to know, "Can you teach us some of the advanced combat techniques you know?" requested Elena Rodriguez. Sarah answered their questions patiently, finding that she genuinely enjoyed the teaching role that had been thrust upon her. Her experiences had given her insights that could benefit others, and sharing that knowledge felt like a natural extension of her service mission. Jake Morrison approached her privately as the crowd began to thin. "I wanted to thank you personally for how you handled the revelation about your background. You could have made us all feel pretty foolish for not recognizing your capabilities, but you didn't. Everyone performed according to their understanding of the situation," Sarah replied. "That's what good military personnel do. Still, it shows character. I hope I can learn from your example over the remaining months of training." As the days that followed established new routines, Sarah found that the modified program exceeded her expectations. Training scenarios became significantly more challenging and realistic when she participated at her actual capability level, forcing other cadets to elevate their own performance to keep pace. More importantly, she discovered that teaching and mentoring came naturally to her. Helping other cadets understand advanced tactical concepts and develop their leadership capabilities proved to be as rewarding as her own learning and development. The respect and trust she had earned from her fellow cadets deepened as they observed her in action during advanced simulations. They saw how she thought through complex problems, managed stress and uncertainty, and made difficult decisions under pressure. More than any theoretical instruction, these real-time demonstrations provided valuable lessons about military excellence. Tommy Lou captured the sentiment of many cadets when he said, "Having you here has shown us what we're all working toward. You're proof that humans can achieve extraordinary capabilities through dedication and training." 3 weeks into the new arrangement, Sarah received a personal message from Admiral Torres that read, "Initial reports from Zenith Station indicate that your modified program is exceeding all expectations. Cadet performance metrics have improved across the board, and training effectiveness has increased significantly. Your decision to complete the program appears to have been exactly the right choice." As Sarah looked out through the viewport at the gas giant below, she reflected on the unexpected turns her assignment had taken. What began as a quiet cover mission had evolved into something much more meaningful and impactful. She had discovered that her greatest contribution might not be the classified operations that earned her decorations, but rather the knowledge and experience she could pass on to the next generation of human space forces. In teaching others to reach their potential, she was helping ensure that humanity would continue to produce the kind of warriors capable of defending human space against any threat. The remaining months of training would bring new challenges and opportunities, but Sarah was confident that she had found her true calling as both an elite operator and a mentor to future leaders. In revealing who she really was, she had discovered possibilities she had never previously considered. And in the far reaches of human space, where unknown threats waited among the stars, the graduates of Zenith Station would carry with them lessons learned from one of humanity's finest warriors, making them better prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead.
That's her? No way.
She doesn't even flinch.
You point long enough, you'll lose that finger.
Yes, ma'am.